For the world's ultra-wealthy, the planet had become a cage. A beautiful, luxurious cage, but a cage nonetheless, filled with paparazzi, political instability, and the constant prying eyes of the world. Julian Blackwood, a renegade architect who had grown bored of building sterile glass penthouses for them, saw a new market. Not for bigger houses, but for better cages. His vision was radical: to stop building on the world and to start building new private worlds from scratch. He would not just design homes, he would design sovereign, artificial, private islands. He would sell the one thing that no billionaire could truly buy: the power to disappear.
His first client was a reclusive tech mogul who had made his fortune and then vanished from the public eye. The project was named Ethelgard. It was not just an island, it was a self-contained arcology, a masterpiece of engineering. It had its own geothermal power plant, its own desalination and water recycling systems, its own hydroponic farms, and its own state-of-the-art military-grade security system, including a submarine-detecting sonar net and an anti-drone laser grid. The island's main residence was a breathtaking villa that could retract completely underground at the touch of a button, leaving only a pristine, natural landscape. It was the ultimate fortress of solitude.
The construction of Ethelgard, multi-billion-dollar endeavor, was a monumental struggle. Building a private world in the middle of a hostile ocean was an engineering nightmare. Unpredictable deep-sea currents caused structural problems. The advanced life support systems failed their initial tests. The project fell massively behind schedule and grotesquely over budget. The world's media, catching wind of the struggling project, began to mock it mercilessly. They called it Blackwood's folly, the billion-dollar boondoggle, a monument to a rich man's ego that was destined to sink into the sea.
Julian was on the verge of ruin. His client was threatening to pull the plug. His reputation was in tatters. He was a laughingstock in the world he had once dominated. He stood alone on the half-finished, storm-battered deck of his beautiful, failing creation, a king of a broken, sinking kingdom. He had gambled everything on this one audacious vision, and it seemed the world and the ocean itself had called his bluff. The dream was dead. As Julian stood on the brink of ruin, the world outside began to burn. A sudden, catastrophic global crisis hit, a perfect storm of a market collapse, a crippling cyber attack, and widespread civil unrest. The interconnected systems that held modern civilization together snapped. For the first time in a century, the gilded cages of the super-rich were no longer safe. Their penthouses, their private estates, their super yachts, they were all vulnerable, high-profile targets in a world that had suddenly become hostile. There was nowhere left to hide. The reclusive tech mogul, Julian's only client, called him. His voice laced with a fear Julian had never heard before. He was not calling to cancel. He was calling to accelerate. "I don't care what it costs," he said. "Finish it. Now." The billion-dollar boondoggle was suddenly no longer a luxury item. It was an ark. The only ark at a world that was beginning to drown. With a near-infinite, desperate injection of new capital and a singular, terrifying purpose, Julian and his exhausted team began to work with his superhuman ferocity, racing against the collapse of civilization itself. Just as the global situation reached its nadir, they finished Ethelgard. Julian initiated the Genesis Protocol. A massive underwater sea gate silently closed, isolating the island. The anti-drone laser grid went active. The communications switched to a private military-grade satellite. Ethelgard vanished from the grid, becoming the only truly secure, self-sufficient, and civilized place left on Earth. The news of this one single point of absolute stability in a world of chaos began to leak out through encrypted channels. The joke, Blackwood's folly, had become the most desirable piece of real estate in human history. The world's remaining billionaires, now refugees from their own failed states, began a frantic, desperate bidding war, not for a house, but for sanctuary. They contacted Julian, no longer a laughingstock, but a prophet. He was the only man on earth who could sell the ultimate luxury, a perfect, bespoke, and completely controllable reality. The demand was infinite. His price was absolute. He was no longer an architect. He was a creator of sovereign nations for a client list of fallen kings. Julian Blackwood became the most powerful and exclusive builder in the world. He founded Blackwood Sanctuaries, a company that did not have clients but patrons. He interviewed the world's desperate billionaires, not to hear their offers, but to judge their character. He was not just building islands, he was curating a new, global, and utterly detached civilization of the elite. His price was not just money. It was influence, resources, and a pledge of allegiance to his new apolitical and sovereign network of island states. He began to build Boreas, a sleek Arctic fortress carved into a massive iceberg for a reclusive data mogul. Ithaca, a vibrant, floating Mediterranean archipelago for a shipping tycoon. Shangri-La, a stunning, terraced sanctuary built onto the side of an inaccessible mountain for a consortium of artists and philosophers. Each project was a masterpiece, pushing the boundaries of engineering and architecture, a network of private utopias, each one a testament to his singular, uncompromising vision. He was building a new Atlantis, a scattered archipelago of perfection in a decaying world. But as his empire of islands grew, a profound loneliness began to set in. He was the king of a world of kings, a creator of perfect, isolated paradises for people who had forgotten how to connect. He walked the perfect, empty beaches of his own island, surrounded by breathtaking beauty and the quiet hum of flawless technology. He had built the ultimate escape, but in doing so, he had built himself the most perfect prison of all. He had security, he had power, he had wealth beyond imagination, but he was utterly, completely, and profoundly alone. The turning point came from a message from the outside world, the first he had received in years. It was a plea, not from a billionaire, but from a non-profit organization of doctors and scientists. They were on the verge of a breakthrough in curing a rare, deadly children's disease, but their research was being held back by a lack of a perfectly stable, secure, and isolated environment for their final critical experiments. They weren't asking for an island. They were asking to borrow his perfection, just for a little while, for a cause greater than any individual's safety. The scientist's plea was a stone dropped into the still, perfect, lonely pool of Julian's world. It awakened a part of him that had been dormant for years. The idealist, the architect who wanted to build a better world, not just escape from a broken one. He made a decision that shocked his network of billionaire patrons. He agreed. He would not just lend them a lab, he would personally design and build for them for free Hygeia, the most advanced, perfectly isolated and secure medical research facility in human history. A new island dedicated not to a person, but to a purpose. The scientist's plea was a stone dropped into the still, perfect, lonely pool of Julian's world. It awakened a part of him that had been dormant for years, the idealist, the architect who wanted to build a better world, not just escape from a broken one. He made a decision that shocked his network of billionaire patrons. He agreed. He would not just lend them a lab, he would personally design and build for them, for free, Hygeia, the most advanced, perfectly isolated and secure medical research facility in human history. A new island dedicated not to a person, but to a purpose. Hygeia was a masterpiece, a perfect ecosystem for discovery. In its secure, stable environment, the scientists achieved their breakthrough in record time. The cure was found. But Julian's vision went further. Hygeia became the first open sanctuary, a neutral ground, a modern-day Switzerland, where the world's brightest minds could come to collaborate on humanity's biggest challenges: climate change, disease, energy, free from political and corporate interference, protected by his perfect security. He had found his true purpose. He was not a seller of escapes. He was a builder of sanctuaries, not just for the rich, but for the ideas that could save everyone. He had started by creating the ultimate symbol of isolation and had ended up creating the world's greatest hub of collaboration. He had learned that the ultimate luxury is not a perfect private world, but the ability to build a bridge to a better shared one. The Blackwood Sanctuaries network was transformed. It was no longer just a collection of private arcs for billionaires. It became the nervous system of a new, global, and apolitical brain trust. Each island specialized. Ethelgard became the center for AI and data security, Hygeia for biomedical research, Boreas for climate science. The world's wealthiest individuals, in order to maintain their place in this exclusive network, were now required to dedicate a significant portion of their resources and their island's infrastructure to the Foundation's global projects. Their gilded cages had become golden contributors to the future of humanity. Julian Blackwood, the architect of private worlds, became the quiet chancellor of this new informal world government of intellect and resources. He never held a political title. He never gave a speech at the UN. His power was invisible, based on a single undeniable fact. He was the architect of the only truly safe, stable, and productive places on a still chaotic planet. He had created a new world, not by conquering the old one, but by simply building a better alternative that the old world's most powerful players desperately wanted to join. His story became a legend for a new generation of builders and dreamers. He was the man who had failed so spectacularly that his failure became the cornerstone of his success. He was the ultimate pragmatist who rediscovered his idealism. He proved that the most powerful currency is not money or influence, but the ability to create a space, physical or intellectual, where the future can be safely born. He was the architect who sold the world's most exclusive escape, only to teach his clients and the world that true progress is not found in isolation, but in connection. That the ultimate sanctuary is not a fortress with walls, but a laboratory with open doors. He was the man who built islands, and in the end, he taught us all how to build bridges.